Good afternoon, I'm Deepthi. Here I'm going to present my seminar on Criticism Visible and Invisible by Herman Northrop Frye. Herman Northrop Frye was a Canadian literary critic and literary theorist, and also considered to be one of the most influential of the 20th century. The present essay, Criticism Visible and Invisible, originally appeared in College English in October 1964. It is significant for Frye's critical theory on teaching literature. The theme of this essay is that criticism should lead on to the possession and experience of literature. Thus, Frye makes use of Platonic connotations, daimonia and nous to explain the distinction or difference between knowledge about and knowledge of things. He says that these two levels of knowledge are part of every ordinary language process. When a person learns to drive a car, his conscious mind comes into contact with an alien object. When the skill is learned, the object ceases to be objective and becomes an extension of the personality. The trained driver cannot impart his hidden skill to others. Frye says that literature presents the same distinction. According to him, literature cannot be taught, and what one teaches is criticism. Knowledge about literature is to make a pedant a cultivated person for whom literature is a possession and an experience. Such experience cannot be transmitted fully. Then Frye talks about different teachings of literature. First, humanism. The great strength of humanism is that it went beyond the study of Greek and Latin classics in literature and insisted its relevance to cultivated life. However, the literature of classics tended to be an aristocratic one, and it saw literature as a hierarchy of comparative greatness. Then the philologists of the 19th century. They took the form of critical arrogance as they took the models of great poets and applied them to the lesser poets, such as Skelton and Yard, and underrated them. Frye says that every poet should be examined on his own terms, because every poet will surely have unique literary experience. Then New Criticism. It began by challenging the tendency to accept knowledge about literature as a substitute for literary experience. So they set the goal of literary experience before the students and insisted them not to find meanings in the footnotes or introduction. It is the first critical movement to set the text of literary work as the object of study for its students, and also a revolutionary critical practice which is concerned to deal with literary work without tension. Metaphor of taste foregrounds the real truth in criticism. It means the literary work is something designed to provide enjoyment and evaluation. Very often, a critic is concerned with evaluating literature and separating the good from the bad in literature. Frye wants to modify this aspect in three ways. He says that the area of literature should not be restricted to the conventionally literary but expanded to the entire area of verbal experience. The evaluating activity should not be concerned with civil wars. Second, the distinction of good and bad is not a simple opposing of the conventionally literary to the conventionally subliterary. Third, literature is a power to be possessed and not a body of objects to be studied. Here, Frye remains the remark by Milton in Areopagitica, that a wise man would make a better use of an ideal pamphlet than a fool of Holy Scripture. This question of censorship takes us back to the metaphor of taste. Censor himself never admits of being adversely affected by what he sees and reads. Frye also advocates critical dandyism. It involves evaluating a work of literature with words of either approval or disapproval. This tendency falls on the wrong side as it separates the work from the students or the reader. According to Frye, every writer must be examined to see what sort of literary experience he can supply. All teaching of literature must point beyond literary diarrhea. Fry says that there are two contexts in which a literary work is potential. First, an internal context, second, an external context. Internal context means internally the writer has a potential theme and he tries to actualize it in his writing. Externally, the actualized literary work becomes a potential experience for students, critic, or reader. For Fry, all methods of criticism and teachings are bad if they encourage separation of the student and literary work, and they are good if they overcome such separation. He does not recommend different schools of criticism because they create a lot of confusions in literary theory. Fry says that literature expresses the preoccupations of the society with its social, religious, and political values. It is not an aesthetic but ethical and participating one. The literary works are powers to be observed and not things to be contemplated. A large part of criticism is concerned with commentary. It only separates the writer from the reader or a student. Fry says that real teaching means placing literary experience in front of the student with no substitutes. According to Fry, the central activity of criticism is to understand literature and to establish a context for the literary work that is studied. It is to relate the work with the context in the writer's life and his time and in the history and in the total structure of literature. The central activity has a further context known as lower and upper limit of criticism. On the lower limit, criticism is militant and is an activity of evaluation. It is concerned with freedom of speech and thought. The upper limit of criticism is the ultimate function of criticism. Upper limit of criticism is the triumphant leading to the inner possession of literature as an imaginative force in which criticism is glorified and rendered invisible through self-realization of the literary experience. Therefore, understanding of literature equated with having literary experience leads the author to discuss why literature cannot be taught. Thank you.